right, welcome everyone. We're ready to get going. This is the panel discussion about running a software business. And we have here our experts on the topic, our experts of the day. We have Paul Levine, Geoff Perlman, and Fred Roller. And what we're going to do here is I got a few initial topics they're going to just touch on real quick, and then we'll open it up for questions afterwards. And we'll play it from there. So let's get started with our first topic, which is introductions and backgrounds. We'll start with Fred. What you're going to do is use this magic mic here and pass it down the line.
Can you hear me? Apparently you can. My name is Fred Roller. I run the company FW Roller & Associates. I've been doing that since my senior year in college. And my first commercial application was for dental offices, medical management software, which I developed during my senior year. And that business took off. It did very well. And then my partner, a friend's father, took advantage of that, and that business ended. It's a long story. And I got into consulting. It was a good lesson early on in life. And I did a lot of ERP consulting and software development for those businesses over the last few decades, mostly in New York. And over the last few years have released a few products for the VMware market, as well as for telecommunications, dynamic DNS, and I'll have some medical products being released next year. And I got into Xojo in 2007. That was shortly after Apple moved to Intel processors and VMware released the Fusion beta. So I was able to run Windows on a Mac, and I'd always been a Windows guy. And I learned about this little company out in Austin, Real Software, and all of that came together very nicely. And I'm very happy that I chose Xojo. It's been a great product and has allowed us to do much more than we could have with other products. We're very productive, as you all know. I think that's it.
So I'm so tempted to say, hey babe, I'll be back to pick you up later. Yeah, magic mic. No, you remember that commercial? No. No? Oh, too bad. Anyway, I'm Geoff Perlman.
Tell her bad jokes.
Yes, tell her bad jokes. No, I'm obviously the founder and CEO of Xojo. I have worked for myself for all but 6 years of my adult life. I didn't plan on being an entrepreneur. That was never part of my plan. I was pushed into it, I think. Sometimes things happen and you have no other choice but to take, plan B, and so that's how I ended up as an entrepreneur. It's always been in technology of some kind. That's just what I was always into. I blame one of my older brothers for that because he liked to watch Star Trek, and I had to wait through Star Trek to see MASH. So I got stuck watching Star Trek and became a fan of technology from watching Star Trek. And I guess also that my dad is an electrical engineer. That helped too. Anyway, so yeah, I've been I started off doing consulting, then writing custom software, and then became a development tools company. So that was roughly the order of operations. And yeah, that's about it.
So my name is Paul. In '99, I discovered Real Basic at the time, and I just started playing around with it, and I created a file manager called Macintosh Explorer. And it was kind of like the Windows Explorer file manager, but for Mac computers. And I put that up at the time on versiontracker.com and all those websites, and it became, I think because of the name, it really attracted a lot of attention. And from there, I created an HTML editor, and then I did search engine optimization software for both Mac and Windows. And at the time, nobody was really doing it specifically for Mac computers. And I started to get a lot of requests from iWeb users, which was Apple's old website builder. When Apple discontinued iWeb back in 2011, I started working on my own drag and drop website builder, which is called Everweb, and that's my main focus now. So I've been working with Xojo for 16, 17 years already, and yeah, I've been working for myself the whole time, and the website builder now is my main focus.
I just want to add one thing real quick before you change slides. We said that the session was about running a software business, but a lot of Paul and I were talking during lunch, and a lot of our experience relates to just running an organization at all. Software is just one type of organization. So if you have questions that are just related to that in general, I think we have some experience that's valuable that we could share.
All right, cool. We do the snaking thing, so Paul will start the next thing first.
I guess he doesn't need a mic, right? He's got one.
I don't need a mic, I have my own mic.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the moderator. I can't mute you guys, though, if I don't like what you're saying. So I have here, how did you get started? Some of you talked about how you already got started, but maybe kind of spin that a little bit and talk about some of the things you ran into while you were trying to start the company. Something along that line, because that's often a big leap for a lot of people.
Sure. Well, actually, I think that the way I got started kind of influenced the way that I look at my software company now. So the main reason that I started using Xojo, Real Basic at the time, was because my brother had received a free version of it to do a review of it in a magazine, because he used to do these reviews. And he just gave it to me and he said, learn it, do it. So I had a free, I was 12 or 13, I didn't have a credit card or anything to actually make software, but I had this free version. I don't think it let me build at the time, but I was able to use it without paying for it. And so I got addicted to it. I really enjoyed the problem-solving aspect of it. And it let me learn how to use the software, and it wasn't until I actually had to, that I actually wanted to release something to other people that I needed to pay for it. So I was kind of invested in the product at that time, and it's trapped me for the last 17 years. And I guess we were talking about that before, but really the investment, and that's how I model my software now. So with my website builder, you can use it for free, and it's only when you actually have to publish it that you pay for it. So the customers are all invested in it. They use it and they like it. They're not going to switch once they're all finished just because they have to pay for something. So it's kind of how I got started has kind of shaped how I look at my own software business. Challenges along the way have definitely been all the changing versions from PPC to Intel to Cocoa, Carbon to Cocoa, which I'm sure has been much more difficult for Xojo because they take a lot of the hard work away from all of us. So those have definitely been a big challenge, and obviously growing, but letting people use the software for free and taking away those barriers of use was definitely influential for me when I was younger, and has shaped how I run my business now.
So I'll talk about how I started this business. So I worked in Silicon Valley for 4 years for a development tools company, and I actually went to interview at that company thinking that I wasn't going to take any job they offered me, because I kind of already knew what it paid and I was making more than that as a consultant. But what I didn't know is when I got there, they offered me a different job, which paid more. And there's no better way to interview than for a job you're not going to take. Because you're totally, you say anything you want, you're totally calm, you really don't care what they think. It's the best possible environment to be in. I mean, they literally said, well, we're looking for a manager, and I just said to them flat out, manager, that sounds like more money. And, which was really the issue, So anyway, so I ended up, then I actually found myself having to consider taking a job, which I hadn't gone up there because I was living in Southern California, they were in Northern California. So I said, well, I'll think about it, and I went home. And I was 25, and I called my dad and said, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to make this decision. And he said, well, call them back, ask for 10% more salary, and if they say yes, then take the job. That seemed totally reasonable. That was like a nice formula, it's like an algorithm. Okay, just run that algorithm. And so I did that, and they said yes, and so I moved up there. And I thought, great, I'm going to learn how to run a software company. That was something I really wanted to do. And what I learned instead, which was infinitely more valuable, is how not to run a software company. Because it's easy to find books that tell you how to do things, but it's hard to find books that tell you how not to do things. And that was really valuable. And after 4 years, I decided I learned everything I came there to learn. And so a friend of mine was moving to Austin, Texas, and so I moved. Now, I started doing custom software, and I was doing it alone, and I'm just not the alone sort of person. So I wanted to start building a business, and Jason had, back there, Jason had taken one of the classes I taught when I was in Silicon Valley when he was like, I don't know, 10. And, no, I'm kidding. And anyway, I called him up and he was doing software development for a company in Oklahoma, and I said, we should work together. And he thought it was a good idea, and I thought it was a good idea, and I said, well, let's both think about it over the weekend, and then see how we feel about it on Monday. And he agreed, and so we both agreed, and he came to work for me. And I have to say, that was definitely in the top 5 of the scariest things I've ever done. I don't know about you guys, but the first time you hire somebody, first time somebody is dependent upon you, right, to make the right decisions, to, that are going to result in revenue that's going to allow them to pay their rent, put food on the table, that's a pretty scary thing to do. So that was, I think just getting past that first step was a big challenge, and getting comfortable with that idea. And I remember saying to Jason, we have 2 choices. We can pay ourselves a fixed salary and work however many hours it takes to earn that, or we can just pay ourselves based on what we earn, right? Which make it much more variable. And we agreed that we wanted something more stable and fixed, which basically meant we worked like, I think, 9 in the morning to about midnight, pretty much every day, except the weekends. But yeah, so definitely some big challenges.
Shall I focus a bit more on challenges than just how I got started?
Well, check. Now is it dead? All right, well, challenges is my next slide, so feel free to you can go back on that after. So you can, challenges with how you're getting started is appropriate. I think after we'll talk about challenges.
Let's talk about how you got started.
Okay. Getting started for me was surprisingly relatively easy. I started writing applications for teachers in high school. This is in the late 70s for some of their side businesses, and they were willing to pay for that, and I enjoyed doing it. And from that point, I always found it relatively easy to make money developing software. So the starting was never that challenging for me, and I've been fortunate in the past where I've been in certain industries at the right time. They were quite lucrative, so the concern about hiring people was not that big a deal, because even if I made mistakes, which I did of course, especially while younger, there was enough money there to make up for those mistakes. But I mentioned early on about the friend's father. That start was a very interesting one. So that was my first real business, forming a corporation and having officers in the corporation and bringing other people on board, and I owned half of that business. But the challenging part of getting started there was, maybe not the getting started part, but learning that trust and relationships played a big role. It wasn't just about writing software and hiring tech people and dealing with customers. There was this other aspect, and that's the people you choose to partner with, who have as much power as you have.
All right, good. Well, you have the mic, so you get to transition to the next thing, which is talking about challenges in running your business, maybe more recent or throughout its lifetime.
Certainly. I think the greatest challenge that most of you will face, that we all face, is the infrastructure that you have to build around your product. So, a lot of us, we learn how to develop and we get good at that, and you create some really cool piece of software, whatever that may be, and you're going to try and go out there and sell it. Well, you've got to handle payments, you've got to handle a licensing system, you've got to deal with support, and if you do some of that stuff in-house, which you might be inclined to do, which I am because you're technical, you start learning about servers and different operating systems and load balancing and security and all these things that may be well outside of the scope of this product that you may have built. And I think that's a tremendous challenge, and certainly depending on the product that you create, you may find that the effort to build the infrastructure around your product is actually greater than the effort for the product development itself, at least initially. And I found that to be, for me, the greatest challenge. Not as much of a technical challenge, because I enjoy all of those things, I like to tinker, but time. Wow, did it take a while. Months and months, not the weeks that I had hoped. So, there you go.
So, for me, I'd say the thing I've learned, that rather than it being so much a challenge, but the thing that I've learned over the years is you have to be ready to adapt all the time. The terrain is constantly changing. And I don't mean just the train of technology, that's certainly true, but it's constant challenges. You're dealing with a large group of people. You're dealing with the demands of customers, you're dealing with vendors, you're dealing with employees. You have a lot of relationships. Your own family, you've got to balance your work with your family. And the thing, I think if there was one piece of advice I'd give to someone starting out, at any kind of level of managing, whether you're working in a company or starting your own, is learn to manage people's expectations. You're so much better off setting their expectations realistically from the beginning. Paul told me a story about a guy that he was working with during lunch. He said that this guy just, wasn't delivering, and he just couldn't bring himself to tell Paul that, he couldn't do it. It's so much better. It's so much easier to just be honest with people, and like I said, manage their expectations appropriately. Sometimes it's hard to tell somebody no, or tell them that you can't do whatever it is they want to do, and you want to say something more encouraging because that'll feel good right now. But that's a short-term gain, long-term loss. So I think that's the thing I've learned most over the many years I've been in business, is to manage people's expectations appropriately.
So just building on what Geoff said too, one of the things that I've learned is taking personal responsibility. You're responsible for so much when you have a software company. And one of the things that I learned specifically about taking responsibility is when you hire somebody, if they don't do a proper job, it is almost always your own fault as the manager. It's not their fault. They can't read your mind, or they don't know exactly what you're expecting. If you need to take personal responsibility for almost everything, and I think specifically for hiring, because that's been my biggest challenge, is becoming a manager, especially switching from somebody who started out by themselves, hasn't really worked in the corporate, or hasn't worked at all in any type of corporate world or real job, and going to become a manager. It's very easy to just say, oh, this guy, he doesn't know what he's doing, or whatnot, but it's almost always like my own fault or the manager's fault, I believe. So really taking personal responsibility. The other thing too is when you're dealing with people, there's different cultures, there's different there's different language barriers too. A lot of times you might get an email from a customer, and you might think, how do they not know this? Well, maybe English isn't their first language, and you have to really understand that when working with not just people that you're managing, but your customers as well. So for me, the biggest challenge has been trusting other people and delegating and hiring people, but also understanding that you need to take personal responsibility for anything that goes wrong in your company, but also for anything anybody who doesn't produce the way you might think that they should produce.
Yeah, I've got a comment about that. One of the things I've also learned through making this mistake repeatedly, is you really need to take a long time. Take a good long time when hiring somebody, but fire quickly. Too often, I wouldn't say too often, but occasionally I've hired too quickly, and then just kept hoping that this person was going to deliver, and watching it take forever, and somebody who is not doing a good job becomes toxic because they're not doing that in isolation. I'm not saying they're going to infect the people around them, but it reflects poorly on you as a manager if you've got somebody who's not delivering, because everybody around, everyone knows this person's not delivering. They all know it. And so they're looking at you wondering, well, why aren't you doing something about this? Why is this person still here? And the longer they stay, the worse it gets. So I strongly encourage, take your time, vet the people you're gonna hire. And if somebody is just not right, and gosh, I'm not sure where I'm gonna, we've been through 5 candidates. Don't just hire somebody because they're not right, but you need to fill the spot. That's not worth it. It's just not worth it. It's better to take your time. And when you do realize that it's not going to work out, fire quickly. It's not that there's something wrong with them. It's just this isn't a good fit. That's all. There is another fit. I mean, I heard someone once say, free up their future. That was their euphemism for firing somebody. And the reality is it's not the right job for them. That's all. There's another job out there that is the right one where they'll be really successful. But that's not going to be with you. So, yeah. Anything you want to say about that?
All right, you can keep that. So now we're going to move on to general questions. So if anyone has questions, our esteemed group here has volunteered to answer your questions. Ask away. All right, Bart.
It's more of a logistics as far as what kind of support software do you use for, your financials, invoicing, customer knowledge base, CRM system, and project management software. So what kind of, did you roll your own software? Do you use packages to support your business and customers?
I'll repeat it first. So Bart is asking about the types of software that you guys specifically might use to help you run your business.
Since we've done ERP systems, enterprise resource planning systems, for decades, we simply used one that we've used for decades. And we use a very small portion of that because we're not manufacturing anything. We don't have purchasing and receiving and things like that in any kind of volume. So we did not roll our own. We used something typically more expensive and larger than we would need, but we had access to that essentially for free. We're experts in it, so that's what we used. So I'm not a good one to ask for that.
So we do a combination. For books, we use QuickBooks Online. We're a distributed company, so us all, being able to access is good. We don't use a lot of it though. QuickBooks has a lot of features, invoicing and all that stuff. We don't use any of that. Payroll. When you make a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So we make a development tool. So we find often that we want to build our own software because we can get exactly what we want. We don't have to compromise. But we have to be careful about that and weigh that against what solutions are available. Because it always sounds really easy. I'm just going to whip together an application. Yeah, that ends up being a much bigger job than you originally thought it was going to be. So, if there's an existing package that'll do the job, and we use it. So we have a combination of things. Our customer database, order system, all that, that's all custom. That's a completely custom solution. Same with all of our e-commerce stuff, that's all custom.
So most recently for Everweb, we use a product called WHMCS, which is built for web hosting companies to manage their pretty much their entire company. You could does everything: knowledge base, billing system, support system, managing your servers. It's highly customized. Well, a lot of add-ons that I've created or that other developers have created to let us run our business the way that we want to, but it's really a fantastic system for running a business, for running a hosting business. I think sometimes you have to adapt yourself to what's available out there, because creating your own custom solution, it's not just time consuming and expensive, but you have to work out all the bugs, and you will definitely miss something that these solutions that have been around and tested for a long time have already had. So I tried to stick as much to what's available, but the specific tool that we use lets you completely customize it with their own plugin system, so that's been really good.
Yeah, I agree with Paul. I mean, like I said, we look to see what's available. We sort of try to judge, okay, you know, this solution that's already available, will it do the job? Yeah, maybe it's not perfect, but is it close enough? Because developing our own solution is going to be a fairly big project. So if an existing solution is close enough, it might be worth doing than going and rolling our own. Yeah, because that's going to be a fairly big job too. And you're right, you're going to run into bugs and things like that, and that has to be weighed against how close of a fit is the solution that already exists.
I'd like to add to that. So, to tie into what they each said, we rolled our own licensing system in e-commerce and things like that, but the other aspects we're using an ERP system for. I think a lot of it's going to depend on your skill set, your budget, your time. But generally, if you can find something that works and you can afford it, it makes sense to do that because you don't have to maintain it. But if your need is truly unique, you're certainly going to roll your own. If your budget is tight, but you have time, you might roll your own, right? So it's going to depend, I think, on each of you what you do. But generally speaking, if you can afford it, right, you buy it off the shelf if that fits.
All right, great. Any other questions? Yeah.
You talk about your success story. Can you talk about one worst decision you already did in the past?
All right, so that question is about a worst or a bad decision you've made in the past.
There are so many.
Yeah, worst.
That you can state on a recording.
Let's try to pick one. I think for me it was I was young, but the misjudging somebody's character. That issue I had with that partner at a young age, fortunately I was young, so what I lost could be recovered over my long future ahead. But for me, that was the biggest. I don't think there were any technical choices I made that were a big problem. It was partnering with the wrong person. Because you can just imagine, that's a massive impact. You can recover from other things more easily. So for me, that was the biggest.
I would say I can't point to a specific decision, but a type of decision where I knew what I was supposed to do, and I just delayed and delayed and delayed. I just didn't want to face the reality of it, and you know, that ended up costing me a lot. When if I just done it right in the beginning, when it was obvious, you know, that this thing, whatever it was, wasn't working out, it would just have saved a lot of money, time, heartache, etc. Yeah, so I think it's just what I've learned from that is to be more dedicated to seeing reality for what it really is and acting more quickly.
So for me, I think it's not just something that I've done before, but also something that I continue to struggle with. And I think it's really not believing in my product or myself too, because I think if you really believe in your product, every dollar that you put into it is an investment, right? Like, why would you go and put money into the stock market, into someone else's business, or into a house or something? When if you really believe in yourself and your product, you should be putting that money into your product and trying to develop it. And I like looking at it as a high growth opportunity. So I think every time I've hesitated to invest in myself or doubted it, you know, what's the worst that could happen, or why would I believe in somebody else? That somebody else can be successful, and that I couldn't. So really understanding that I have good ideas and I should be investing in my own product continually, I think is a thing that I've done in the past and an ongoing thing that, you know, sometimes I struggle with too.
Yeah, I think you need to have the confidence to, you absolutely need to believe in yourself, but at the same time, balancing that, you have to try to view things as objectively as you can. you don't want to be overconfident, because then you can start to believe that every decision you make is the right one, and you don't question the validity of things. So you have to have the confidence to go do it, right? But the wisdom to recognize, that you don't necessarily have all the answers. I often, consensus is the wrong word, but I want to hear what other people think, because I'm wondering if I've missed something. And oftentimes, I'll ask a few people and I'll find out, yeah, they see it the way I see it. Okay, maybe I didn't miss anything. Or they'll bring up something I hadn't considered. Or they'll have a completely opposite opinion, but I'll still feel strongly about it. Like, okay, so I thought this way and they think differently, but my feelings about whatever the decision is haven't changed. They've survived that conversation. And I find that really helps.
All right, great question. Anyone else have any questions for our esteemed group here?
Yeah.
Another software question. How about project management software?
So the question is about project management software.
So depending on, I've used Asana a lot of times. Asana, A-S-A-N-A, Asana. Trello, really, too. I really like Trello. It's really good, and there's a couple blog posts and instructions on how to use it properly, kind of moving features and bugs over, and I've adapted it a bit to the way that I work. But I really like those two project management products.
So, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm the CEO, what the hell. Okay, so there's a whole side to feedback application. There's a whole side of that you guys aren't exposed to. You're exposed to the side where you report bugs and search for things, but we've created a whole project management side specifically for software, for what we do, that's part of feedback. So in that we can assign bugs to categories, we can assign them to milestones to specific individuals on the team, we can give them priorities. We create milestones. Each release is a milestone. We can say, okay, this milestone's here, and here's when it goes to beta, and here's when it should be released. We've even got it, we had a problem where we'd have an engineering meeting, and we'd say, okay, we're working on release X, we're 2 weeks away from final candidate, we're looking at what's left, yeah, okay, we either got to cut some things, or we got to move the date. We decide, okay, we're going to move the ship date. So we move the ship date ahead, or is that ahead or behind? I can't remember. Anyway, up, yeah, 2 weeks. And then, all of a sudden a week later, Dana in marketing is saying, I've got the press release ready, I'm getting the website ready. No, we're not shipping yet. We've delayed 2 weeks. Well, when were you going to tell me? So we went into feedback, and we made it so that anytime someone changes a milestone date, it just automatically sends out an email, right, to let everybody know that milestone's been changed from this to this. So we no longer have to remember to communicate that. So we do the bulk of our project management for Xojo in feedback, which is written in Xojo. So that's more of our dog fooding, I guess.
Are you releasing that soon?
You guys use feedback all the time?
Yeah, your end.
That's another product, and I don't know if we're gonna get it. We'd be getting into another product business, and I don't know if that's something we want to do. And the other thing is, I have thought about it, because obviously as an entrepreneur, hey, anything you guys will pay for, I'm gonna make. But you have to also consider, it's one thing to build an application for yourself. It's a completely different thing to make that general enough. And as Fred said, talk about infrastructure. All the infrastructure that has to be put in place. Now, sometimes the infrastructure you have is already there, and so you don't have to recreate it, right? It's not going to be all that different. If it's the same kind of customers, especially, but otherwise, you absolutely could be in a situation where there's a lot more you're biting off than you realize. So you better be ready to consider all those factors, right?
That's useful.
Yeah, so not right now. No.
All right, great. Fred had no comment on that earlier. So.
Well, it's There's project management software available to us in the ERP system, and it's really overkill. And quite frankly, our projects have been simple enough that we barely have used it. So I don't have much to add.
Okay.
Yeah, Susan's talk from yesterday mentioned a few things. Basecamp is one I have used in the past that is really excellent, so one to look into as well. Any other questions?
Actually, I was going to make another comment real quick. If you have a team, if it's more than just you, right? Communication is really critical, and that's where project management comes in, and that needs to be part of your thinking. There are plenty of tools out there that are really meant just for one person to use, and if you have a team, that's probably not going to work. So something like Basecamp that's web-based, that's a better choice once you have a team, because you'll need other people to be able to look at the schedule, see when it changes, adjust their parameters on the to-do list, that sort of thing.
All right, Yusuf, you had a question?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about pricing, software pricing? Some people talk for a long time, but how you chose your prices, whether we've been told in the past that some of our software is too cheap, which is the worst thing we've told. How you set the prices, more as you heard about it.
So the easy question about software pricing is what has come up here.
Whether it be consulting or software, I would say charge the maximum the market will bear, whatever you think that may be, and you determine that the best way you can. I think that selling based on price is tough, because then you become a commodity, right? You don't want people to buy you or buy your product because of the price. It's because of the value that you provide, or the service, or the functionality, whatever it may be. And I would charge as much for that, obviously, as you can. How do you pick that? If there is something similar, that's your baseline. If there's not something similar, try to determine the value that the buyer gets out of it. This is how we price lots of software development projects for clients. It was not a matter of our billable time, it's what I thought they would pay. And that was often many factors higher than I would have charged, even at a high billing rate. And you may find the very same thing with the software products. You simply charge what they're willing to pay. If it will save them, a certain amount of labor each year from their employees, you can do some basic math and determine what that number is. Maybe that's $20,000 a year. Save them whatever the number is. That's all I've got to add, Geoff.
Yeah, so on pricing, like Fred said, you can look at other products in the category and see what they charge. If you feel like your product is a lot better, you should price it higher, because people do judge the value of things. I mean, they see a higher price and they wonder, I wonder what is in that product that makes it worth so much more money, right? If they don't think that way, then you're in a commodity situation. And you're either not being honest with yourself, that your product really isn't any better than the competition, or you don't want that person as a customer, because they are going to cost you every penny that they give you, right? If that's all they care about is price. The other thing you want is you want at least some people complaining that your product is too expensive, okay? Because if you don't have that, then you're not charging enough, right? Things we value most often are things where, it was more than I wanted to pay, but boy, is it worth it, right? The other thing is there's just the psychological phenomenon, for what it's worth, where once people commit to buying something, they then convince themselves it was worth the price, right? That's just the psychology of purchasing. So that's another thing to consider.
So I definitely agree with everything that was said here. I think that you should probably look at your competitors, and that is the absolute cheapest you should ever charge. I think you should always be higher than your competitors, especially if you believe that your product is better than theirs, because it is a message of value. Most people will look at the price as how valuable it is, and combined with your company looks like a proper company, like you putting the money back into your company, that you're offering a good service. But definitely look at like what your competitors are charging and charge more than them, and what you think your time is worth, and obviously what the market will bear. And also do testing on different price points. I think you could do A/B testing on different prices, maybe in different markets too. One of the things I want to experiment on, which I haven't yet, is pricing in different countries differently. If you go to, let's say, countries in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia who couldn't afford the prices that North Americans or Western Europeans might pay, it might be a good idea to restrict to show a different price for different countries based on what the market in the different country might pay.
I'd like to add that the low price, and Geoff had mentioned this, so what the market will bear, right? Different countries, different prices, but the bargain shoppers, right? Whether it's a service you're providing or software, whatever it may be, they're the worst customers and clients. I just wanted to emphasize that. Geoff touched on it, but you do not want those people, because they will often cost you more than you brought in from them.
Yeah, so my very first consulting client, first customer I ever wrote a piece of custom software for, she was the worst. I mean, she would call me up, I'd come home and find a voicemail from her, and she'd be screaming at the top of her lungs about some problem. And I'd get that panicked feeling, oh my God, I've got to jump on this right away. And then, it'd say there's 2 messages, so, while I'm so nervously pressing the button on the answering machine to hear the second message, it would be her again, all calm, oh sorry, I figured it out. Yeah, and I didn't know anything about writing a spec, right? My spec was like 2 pages long. It was totally open-ended. It could be interpreted any which way. And I think I made about $1.50 an hour on that job. I mean, it was awful. Yeah, and I would never want a customer like that again. So I agree, Fred. You don't want people who are looking for the cheapest deal. That kind, because then you're just in a commodity. Are you producing something that just anyone can make? Because if you're not, then it's not a commodity. If it's not a commodity, then there's an appropriate price to be paid for it. So.
She did give you something, a good lesson.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know what the worst part of that lesson was though? Years later, I eventually quit her as a client. I told her I can't do this anymore. And years went by, and she called me up and asked me to come back. And I felt bad because we didn't finish the job. So I'm in there working late one night, and her, for lack of a better word, first lieutenant is there, and just the 2 of us. And she says to me, do you know why Carol called you and asked you to come back? Yeah, we didn't finish the job. Now, there is no one else. She's pissed off every single vendor that's been in here. And you were the only one that would come back. Yeah. So, and what I was told, what she said was, it's not just software development. I mean, they were a print broker. She said they're constantly having to find new vendors because the owner was constantly upsetting the vendors that they were using, and they were just saying, you're not worth it. Yeah, so you don't want those kind of people in your life.
All right, well, time-wise, it looks like it's probably a good chance to wrap up. We'll go with one last question from Tim.
That's the real basic question, and I'm sure you guys are experimenting with Xojo all the time. Are there any special side projects that, especially Geoff, I'm kind of curious, anything you're using with Xojo or developing with Xojo just for the fun?
Any fun, special Xojo side projects that you guys are messing around with?
I don't know if they're fun or special to you, but since support for Raspberry Pi has come out, that's been a neat little device for a lot of things, but we've been using it to run HA proxy and handle load balancing and playing with that. And you can even on the Raspberry Pi 3 run web apps on there, right? Multiple instances. So I think that's kind of neat because it's small and inexpensive, but powerful enough to handle that. I mean, think about that, load balancing and a couple of web apps on that little thing. So that's kind of cool. The apps themselves, nothing special, but what they're running on. And the fact that we can do that with Xojo, right? I mean, it's one more platform. Android's coming. That's good stuff.
So this actually leads into a comment I want to make. Each of you decided to make the product or do the service that you're providing for a reason, because you have some passion for it, right? For me, I've always loved development tools, and I love the idea of enabling. Like, I learned C, and I started writing Apple applications in C. I was like, gosh, this is so much work. Really, this is just not satisfying. And so Xojo was a natural thing for me to be involved with. So it can be easy to get too caught up in the business side of your business and get too far away from the thing that you created in the first place. And so for me, I feel like I always have to have my fingers in it. It's what keeps me connected, because it feeds into all the decisions that we make about pricing, about marketing, about doing conferences, everything. So I always have to have a project all the time that I'm working on. Now, I don't work on it 40 hours a week or anything, but I always have to have one. And Travis will get mad at me for saying this, but I built an iOS version of Feedback. I'll show it to you if you're interested. I have it on my phone. And he's like, well, I'm not sure if we're going to release that or not. We have to talk about that. But oftentimes we'll get a bug report from a user, and I'm out somewhere and I've got my phone and I have a case number, but no way to look it up. So I decided I want to learn the iOS framework, so I'll write a version of Feedback for iOS. And so I did that. And my next one, hopefully, actually Norman's got to make some changes to the language reference before I do this, but my next project, I want to write an iPad version of the language reference. Which Paul doesn't know that. I meant to tell you that before when he got up here. But, yeah. But
It's
anyway,
been on my list for years, so this will be fun.
Yeah, well, we can work on it together. Yeah, but apparently Norman's going to have to change some stuff about how we store the data in the database. But anyway, we'll talk about that. So, yeah, those are the projects that I'm working on right now as sort of side projects.
So for me, I really like what I do. I really like working on Everweb all the time, and I'm trying to get away from the computer a little bit more. So my side projects have been some of my other passions that have not involved Xojo, because I don't want to be staring at a computer all day. But I do spend a lot of time working on Everweb. I really, really enjoy using Xojo. I like the problem-solving aspect of programming. So sometimes it's good to step away from the computer.
Yeah, and in terms of the non-computer stuff, just for what it's worth, like Paul, you have to have things that are outside of that realm. And so for me, it's I coach or assistant coach my son's baseball team. And he's been playing, he's 13, he's been playing baseball since, first grade, every season. And I never played organized sports as a kid. I never watched baseball, so that's been a fun thing for the two of us to do. And as you probably know, I'm a drummer. So I have a classic rock band that I created recently with some friends, and so we've been putting that together, and that's been a lot of fun, because it's been a long time since I've been involved in a band. Last time I was probably about 20. So putting that together has been a lot of fun.
I'll add, I sail, I race, I cruise, I travel. They're my passions, and I spend time there. But in terms of the pet projects, a little different than Geoff. I find that I get sucked into those too often, and I need to really focus and spend more time on the business aspect of the business. It's easy to roll up the sleeves and get your hands dirty and tinker when I should be doing something else. So the pet projects are fun, but risky in terms of time.
All right, great. As you can see up here on the slide, we are heading to Grotto's this evening, so you need to meet at 6:40 in the lobby for the giant convoy of people that walk across the street there. And lastly, let's thank our panelists.